Hi, today we're talking with Michael Ventura about Berlin Alexanderplatz, which is a German, I guess you could call it a mini series. It was originally made for Bavarian television um, in 14 parts. And then it was released in the United States. It says here in Wikipedia it was released in the United States for theatrical showings in 1983, but I saw it before 1983. I saw it in 81 or very early 82 because I saw it at the New Art with my mother um, when we were living in Santa Monica. So I don't think that's when it was released in the United States. But anyway, it's from a novel by a guy named Alfred Doblin, who's a very, very interesting character in himself. And it concerns a gentleman who gets out of prison, um, and he's an old soldier from World War One. He's in prison for murdering his girlfriend, and it's kind of his redemption story in a way, but it also encompasses, especially in these first two episodes, it gives us the environment of Weimar Berlin and all the different factors that go into making up his environment. So, why don't you tell me what you thought of it, Michael, and then I'll get into it more.
Okay, I had to remind myself of some basic principles of cinema that I often overlook, and and the most basic is that as James Baldwin pointed out, and others have as well, is that you're looking at what the filmmakers want you to see. That's all the camera can see, what the filmmakers want you to see. And it's not anything like uh, whatever we want to call the truth. It is a vision coming from the psyche of these filmmakers, where it will have its own truths, its internal truths, what it's trying to express as artists, the way my novels do, the way what all art and expression is about, and but it's a willful act of a piece of art, and the artist is expressing sometimes what the artist she or he doesn't know they're expressing. Um, Van Gogh knew that he had to paint the way he did. He didn't know whether he was great. He had every reason to think he wasn't. But he still painted the way he did. And the same thing could be said of anybody doing their work. So I had to detach myself because what I was watching was such degradation. The behavior, or even the premise. He's brutally killed his girlfriend, and he gets only 4 years. Okay, that's never explained. And he's let out after 4 years. And has he changed? Where is the quality of redemption? And you go deeper and deeper into this degrading behavior. And I'm sitting there thinking, why is this filmmaker, why does he want me to see this? And I was appalled that you had to see it at such an early age. That was really beggared belief. And it. I have no idea what you were about 7, how you could have absorbed that, reacted to it. So that's a whole other deal. But I was watching this person, and beautiful filmmaking. I mean, immaculate technique, excellent acting. So I just want to get that said, because these were performances that were not easy to do, and especially the lead performance. When he's getting out of prison, when he is having this panicked response at being out of a prison cell. We get the impression that he's been mostly in isolation, and the way a person who's been blind, if you can suddenly see, it's got to be a terrifying experience. All this input, and that's what he's going through in that first half hour or so. And he's not in control of himself at all, and when he shows up at people's doors, some are glad to see him and some are not, but he's not in any kind of self-possession. He's like a very frightened animal, and the degradation of it overwhelmed me. I didn't get it. I didn't get why I'm being asked to watch this. I don't mean by you. I mean by the filmmakers. I think you have very good reason to go back to it and look at it again from a mature point of view. But it really shocked me, and I don't shock easy. So that's my overall impression. I really admired the filmmaking and the acting, and thought, why? What's the point of this? You mentioned redemptive. I didn't see anything redemptive, and maybe that comes later in the series. So you tell me, because like I say, I'm not easily shocked. I've studied many of the same sorts of events you studied, and the world doesn't surprise me, and people's behavior doesn't surprise me. But this film managed to surprise me. So in a really unpleasant way. It wasn't liking or disliking, or approving or disapproving. That wasn't it. My personal feeling was, why are the filmmakers concentrating on this? What's their point, or their series of points? And so I throw it over to you, because I need your help on this.
Well, it's a story about Weimar Berlin, and Weimar Berlin was incredibly degrading and shocking. Deeply, deeply, deeply degrading and shocking. Child prostitution was totally accepted. There were kids coming in. I mean, this Berlin Alexanderplatz doesn't even scratch the surface of how degrading and shocking Weimar Berlin was. It was worse than Bangkok. People were incredibly, incredibly, incredibly poor because of the Dawes Plan and the Versailles Treaty. They were totally beaten from a war that they had just been through, and the environment, what Franz Bieberkopf kind of represents, like we talked about in Dolce Vita. He's kind of a representative of the German, or not the German male, but the urban German male, because this is also a story about the city and the things that the city does to you, and how habits you adopt to survive in the city that end up not being beneficial to your spiritual growth in the end. And so it's really kind of in a roundabout way, because it wasn't really politically correct to talk about how degrading and awful Weimar Berlin was. He's
Hmm.
giving you this impression of it, um, and I mean literally every woman was prostituting herself. Everybody's mother. There was a street where you would walk down the street, and it was a street for pregnant prostitutes. And as you walk down the street, they become more and more pregnant. And
Jesus.
also, drugs were cocaine and heroin were totally prevalent, and it was all publicized. It was all on the radio and in the films. And
Hmm.
like Marlene Dietrich is just a very tame version of
Right, right.
and Cabaret and things like that are like we get this romanticized vision of Weimar Berlin
Hmm.
for some reason,
Hmm.
and and it wasn't like that at all. And it was a giant factor in why National Socialism rose up, was this just utter
Hmm.
degradation of these people. And I mean, about you always hear about the economy of the Weimar Berlin, and how they like a loaf of bread cost 2 billion Reichmarks or something like that,
Hmm.
and they had to
Hmm.
use
Hmm.
wheelbarrows of cash and all that. But this is even though it doesn't really scratch the surface of how degrading it really was. I mean, he um, the thing about it, in this first 2 hours, you're not really getting the whole the pattern of what occurs with this guy, because in a way you are, because he comes to a point where he says, I'm going to take an oath to myself to be a better man, like
Yes.
and this is just the start of him doing this. And basically throughout the entire, I don't want to kind of give away what occurs, but the entire pattern of this mini series is him making that resolution over and over again, and then falling down over and over and over again, like falling into alcohol over and over again, and falling into just different degeneracy, crime, and sex. But you also see him over this time becoming stronger in his spiritual self, and being able to deflect those influences as well. But it's really like a story of every man in a way, and that sounds kind of grotesque, that he kills his girlfriend in the start, and that's not every man, but he comes from this totally degraded state. And I
Hmm.
think I always was kind of vexed by the first scene with the two rabbis, when he's like talking like right when he gets out of prison, he's like going through
Right,
this
right.
this experience with the two rabbis, but they're kind of like, in a sense, kind of like initiating or welcoming him on this kind of the start of this very perilous and very grueling
Hmm.
path that he's going on. And through this first couple of episodes, you see him wavering back and forth like a bunch of times, where he's trying to
Hmm.
do better, and he's realizing, that going and seeing that woman and raping her was wrong, and not doing
Hmm.
that. And you see these other people wavering too, between these two poles of I don't know what you would call it, honor and or selfishness and selflessness, and and you even see it, like what he has this sex scene with his new girlfriend, and he
Hmm.
starts out very aggressively, and then something happens, and he starts being very tender, and then he keeps,
Hmm.
and every time he starts to waver again, this like this echoey piano comes up in the background, and starts playing.
Hmm.
But that's,
That's very observant. That's very observant.
I mean, there,
I had not consciously realized
the actual novel is a very like James Joyce style montage
that.
novel, where
Hmm.
it's giving all this environment. It's really, Alfred Doblin's like a really unsung, amazing author, but and so it gives you signals in these first 2 hours, and yeah, like, I mean, I totally understood. I knew that you were going to be like, why is, how is this like the protagonist of this story? But I promise you that, like, if you want to continue watching it, I promise you that by the end of the miniseries, you like just come to absolutely love this character, and especially Gunther Lamprecht, the actor. I mean, is just like absolutely amazing. Like I just am
Yes, he
totally
is.
blown away
Absolutely.
by this guy and everybody else in the
Yes, no, and it was superbly acted.
yeah. And I mean, Fassbinder is a really fascinating guy in himself. He's just a really interesting guy. But so in these first couple of episodes, they're really kind of setting the scene of what this guy's environment is, and then
Hmm.
mostly in that second episode, it starts getting into like the political environment that 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 is existing at the time, and the cultural environment, and it's interesting because Alfred Doblin himself is Jewish, but he's also
Hmm.
he's critiquing some of the Jewish influence over the culture at the same time. He's also
Hmm.
critiquing the
Hmm.
National Socialists. He's critiquing the communists. He's like he's showing all these different influences and being critical of them, but also kind of giving a reason for why they exist, right? Like, so
Hmm.
he gets this job selling books. Well, first he gets the job selling the tie pins, and he gives this totally cool like he's outside of the department store selling the tie pins, and he's parodying. They're making a parody of Adolf Hitler, where he's selling the
Yes.
the tie pins. He's giving like an Adolf Hitler speech, but selling tie pins. And it's pretty funny when you think about it in that sense. So
Yes. Yes.
he's kind of like doing capitalism, but as Adolf Hitler, and it's funny. But so he then it's like we like this isn't working for us, so I'm gonna go try and sell newspapers. But the newspaper guy gives him these sex manuals, and in a scene
Hmm.
before that, he's about to have sex with his new girlfriend, and he's reading there's some kind of like impotency drug or something like that,
Right. Right.
and he's talking and he's reading about he's reading the back of it, and he says like produced by or created by Magnus Hirschfeld and this other guy. And Magnus Hirschfeld was he was one of the first guys to do sex change operations that were just
Hmm.
totally barbaric and like just like screwed all these people up, and he really he had this whole sex institute in Berlin that just uh, basically pushed really awful like BDSM stuff and just
Hmm.
really kind of sick sexual stuff. But he was very popular in Berlin at the time, and was kind of pushed out there like through publications and through radio and everything. So he's showing that, and then Franz Bieberkopf gets the job selling these sex manuals, and he starts to you can see like everything is having an impress on him. He's very
Hmm. Hmm.
impressionable, right? Like everything is it's kind of
Yes.
influencing him, and so he takes them home and he's like reading them, and then like he's very like pleasantly tells his girlfriend this story about this pedophile, this homosexual pedophile, like picking up this kid and like telling the story in a way of like, oh, isn't this like acceptable? How terrible this guy got arrested for, and his girlfriend is just like horrified, right? And she takes the manuals back to the guy and like scolds him and everything, and kind of drags Franz Bieberkopf out of this like state of mind, right? And so, but he goes from that like whole world of this weird degeneracy that's being pushed
Hmm.
over
Hmm.
to they go to this bar called the New World, or this nightclub called the New World,
Hmm.
and he meets this
Hmm.
old soldier there, and this guy wants him to sell newspapers, but he's selling newspapers for the National Socialists, right? And the guy gets him to
Uh-huh.
put on a swastika and everything, right? And so it's like he goes from one kind of, in a sense, this is kind of like an analogy to the reactionary um, vision of the National Socialists to this degeneracy that's
Hmm.
going on in Weimar Berlin, like, and so he goes from one
Hmm.
extreme to the next, but he's also just totally, he's so beat up, and he's so like, from the war, then from just trying
Yeah.
to exist in Weimar Germany, and his girlfriend's a hooker, and like he ends up killing her and then goes to prison, and that's horrible. And so he's just totally like, his brain is kind of, or his uh his spirit is kind of like mush,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
everything's kind of
Right.
like, he gets out of prison after 4 years, and he doesn't really understand what's going on in his environment either. Like,
Exactly.
this is all new
Exactly.
to him, right? So he gets that whole influence, and these National Socialists are like, yes, you're an old soldier and you fought, for, and they're kind of appealing to that, like,
Hmm.
German
Hmm.
traditionalism in him, and he kind of like, kind of drifts towards that because of that. But then, this, like, it's funny because he's selling these newspapers, and then a Jewish guy selling sausages of all things, like, comes up to him,
Hmm.
and is kind of like, hey, he's being very friendly to him, and then tells him that he's
Hmm.
Jewish, and Franz is like, well, I don't hate Jewish people. I don't know anything about this. Like, what, what the hell's going on here? And then and then right after that, like, these old guys that he knows from prison come up to him, and they're all communists, right? And they start like teasing him and messing with him, and it gets worse and worse. And there's a really interesting, I mean, the whole thing is directed just like flawlessly and beautifully, and the
Yes.
lighting and everything is
Absolutely.
just, I mean, they threw tons of money, I think, at Fassbinder, and was like, make the best thing that you can. They built that entire set, that whole Weimar.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah, they
I
built
was
the
wondering
whole
about that.
freaking thing. You can watch there's some documentaries on YouTube where there were guys filming the filming of it, and
Uh
yeah,
huh.
that's all a set that they built for this. But
That's really impressive.
there's a really interesting scene in in there where everybody stops moving and the sound stops, and then the camera pans around in a circle around all of them. um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I don't really have anything to say about that, except that it's just a really interesting film maneuver, and
It,
it really works.
well, calling it a maneuver is very accurate, uh, uh, and it does work. It somehow it somehow makes you aware of the form.
Yeah.
And it reminds you that you're being told a story.
Yeah. Hmm.
Uh, uh, it it, uh, it's saying all of a sudden, okay, this is a movie, and you're being told a story, and this is the world that we're talking about. Because that move can't come. Maneuver is a really good word for it. That maneuver can't come from what's going on. It's imposed on what's going on, and I think it's like a getting some water splash in your face, and you're kind of refreshed by it, and then the
Yeah.
story goes on.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's almost like it's getting so heated, and he's kind of like surrounded by these hornets, and he's really confused by all these different factors that are like coming at him from the environment, the communists and the Nazis and the like sex stuff and everything, and I think especially the sex stuff, it like gets really, the lust part of this guy is really deeply rooted, and I think over the course of it, that's kind of one of the deepest things that he, and I think for every man, it's kind of like one of those deep things that you have to come to terms with at a very deep level,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
but yeah, so he's being surrounded by these guys, and then he goes to the bar and he's like drinking, and he's just like, geez, this is also confusing, and he's trying to get his head together. And also, it's pretty apparent that this guy's a little bit off, right? Like
Yeah.
he, he's been driven crazy, by maybe he was crazy to begin with, but he's definitely, and Gunther Lamprecht really uh, shows that in a very realistic way. Like he shows insanity, or creeping insanity, or like the edges of insanity. I think in a very good way. The talking to himself, the uh, it's very
Well, I
believable.
think his performance is heroic.
Oh yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
I mean,
just to
to go
watch the,
that deeply and for
yeah,
that long.
yeah, man. I mean, and it gets better and better and better. It's just really, I mean, I'm always just in awe of Gunther Lamprecht and that character, and how he plays it. It's really amazing. But so yeah, he goes to the bar, and the communists show up again, and they're basically like just as bad as like National Socialist thugs. Like
Yep. Yep.
they're just as awful, and but they're really, they're kind of calling this German man out on everything that's a part of his national nature. Like they're calling him
Mm-hmm.
out on being a soldier, and every the just the kind of inborn nationalism like within this guy, and it's kind of something that's kind of natural to him and organic to him, and it starts to really get to him, and but at the same time he has this attitude of just defending himself, and he says in that confrontation, he says, over and over again, he says, I'm not going to be violent unless somebody hits me. I'm not going to be violent unless somebody
Mm-hmm.
hits me. And I think that's a part of, in these first two episodes, it's showing that he's become aware of his violent nature, and what he's capable of,
Mm-hmm.
and he's starting to question himself, and he's really starting to question himself on a bunch of different levels, on a sexual level, and like a street level, and aggression level, and even kind of a an alcohol level a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but so he, and the interesting thing in it is, yeah, like obviously there's people that are kind of like, they're standing back from him, and when they see him after 4 years, and a bunch of different people say, like, you don't want to slip back into the life you were living before. You don't want to be that
Mm-hmm.
guy again, and watch yourself and everything. But you also see this genuine love for the guy, and who he really is. Like they can see his real nature and his real spirit. Like no matter how awful he can be, there's this kind of golden nature within him that's evident, that they want to at least um, encourage him and help him to survive, so that this nature can express itself. And like the Hannah Shigula character, the blonde woman with her boyfriend that shows up and gives him
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
money and,
Yes.
and
Yes.
stuff, like they just
No,
genuinely love him.
it's interesting because he was obviously liked by some people very much,
Right.
and when they show up, you're going, why are you having anything to do with this guy? You people look relatively strange, but obviously there's something in him that these people relate to. Obviously, the person that they knew was not in the shape that this guy is in now, and so that is something in these episodes that keeps on puzzling. It keeps on, as though the filmmaker was
Yeah.
saying to me, "These guys are giving him a chance. You give him a chance."
Yeah. It's supposed to puzzle you, and I think that if the filmmaking wasn't so good and the acting wasn't so good, most people would just stop after the first or second episode, right? Like that,
Yep.
it,
Yep.
it would
Definitely.
be it would be too brutal for them. And it really is a like Alfred Doblin, the author of this book. He he was a theosophist himself, and he was
Mm-hmm.
very deeply into like Indian mythology and the Bhagavad Gita and stuff like that. And what he's I think what he's trying to express is this constant aspiration of not just Franz Bieberkopf, but just humanity in general, and in microcosm the German people during
Mm-hmm.
this period where they're just it's like a it's like they're burning off the dross within them,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the sin
Running off the dross.
and they're
Mm.
and so the whole story is really, like I said, it's like this cycle that um, that Franz keeps going through, where he becomes more and more um, sensual. He becomes more and more attached to worldly things, and becomes more and more sinful, and then he snaps out of it and starts to be, I'm gonna be a good boy again. I'm gonna be a good boy again, and he keeps trying and trying, and it's really that one of the interesting things about it is, if you listen to the soundtrack album, and it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have any of that like background music, which is really cool. It doesn't have the
Mm-hmm.
the echoey piano stuff and the kind of psychedelic music. It just has like the main score kind of over and over again in a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of different versions.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of the most hopeful pieces of music you'll ever listen to. Like it's just totally kind of like bright and hopeful, but very tender at the same time, and it really reflects the this kind of journey that Franz is on, and I think
Mm-hmm.
it's an intentional thing. I think in the novel and in the film that you're going to look at this character as like, what the hell, man? Like, how could this be the protagonist of this? And also it's kind of it doesn't justify him killing his girlfriend, but it shows
Mm-hmm.
what this life is like, where your your girlfriend has to prostitute herself. Like it's just like an
Mm-hmm.
accepted, and it's also just an accepted thing of that culture of Berlin at the time, that
Mm-hmm.
every woman
Mm-hmm.
is prostituting herself, and how and he keeps getting these different girlfriends over the course of the miniseries,
Mm-hmm.
and he keeps going through this cycle of like emasculation and how he deals with it. And so it's like he didn't learn. He really fucked up the first time he was emasculated and killed his girlfriend, and and so he keeps getting emasculated over the course of this, and you see all the different ways he tries to not justify it to himself, but deal with it, and still like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
keep some kind of dignity about himself, right?
Right.
So it's
Right.
it's in it's again it's the story of the urban German male during this time, but it's also a story of men, and how do they deal with
Mm-hmm.
this emasculation? How do they deal with feeling like their balls have been cut off over and over again?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what do you do, right? You can't kill your girlfriend, man. Like you have to.
That's really looked down upon. Yes.
Yeah, and but at the same time, it also the portrayal of all these women is also extremely tender, and it's showing that
Mm-hmm.
it's showing how they deal with having to degrade themselves too. That's a
Mm-hmm.
big part of the
Mm-hmm.
story too. Um, so it is. I mean, it sounds really grueling. Like the whole freaking thing just sounds super grueling, but it's also just a really hopeful story, and you really come to love Franz Bieberkopf and really like appreciate this kind of this guy who's just slowly solidifying himself, and trying to get away from, and he just goes through these really, really, really awful things, and he keeps getting betrayed by people, and but at the same time he never hates the people that betray him. So there's also these these spiritual qualities that he already has developed in himself that are rooted in him, where he kind of sees the light even in his enemies, even in the people that really hurt him. He attempts to like look at them just as a part of the human condition, and not as, he doesn't take it personally in a sense. So yeah, I totally understand, your whole reaction to it, and when I started watching it again, I was like, oh my god, like this is, I don't know if he's gonna be able to watch this, but yeah, I don't know. Do you want to keep watching it, or what do you want to?
I accept the challenge. I think your vision of it is very impressive, and you opened my eyes in various ways to it, and I want to watch it more so I can see what you see. So yes, let's
Okay.
do it.
Well, if at any time you want to pull out, we can do that. Or
Okay.
we can also I was thinking we could just we don't have to do this all like, in all at once. Like we could, do some comedies or something one week and then do like the next two episodes or something like that. Right?
Yeah, we might do that, but let's go on with it for now.
Okay. All right.
Let's go on with it for now. What you said is really, literally opening my eyes, and I want to follow your lead on this.
Yeah.
I think it's worth doing.
I mean, another movie that we should watch in the future is The Marriage of Maria Braun, which is another Fassbinder movie that's really, really, really good, and you'd really like that movie a lot. And it's kind of like it centers around a woman in post-war Germany, and that's a really good one too. But Fassbinder was a very prolific filmmaker. He made like 100 movies in like 10 years.
Oh my God.
Yeah, he's just a crazy guy. But yeah, okay, we'll stop there because you got to get going.